The library where books whisper. The rain drummed a steady rhythm against the tall, arched windows of the old library. Milo stepped inside, shaking his wet umbrella. He thought books were nothing but dusty paper and boring words. Behind a heavy oak desk sat Miss Maple, her spectacles perched on the end of her nose. She looked at him with a knowing glint in her eyes. "Welcome, Milo," she said softly. "Explore as you like, but remember one thing. Whatever you do, don't ignore a whispering book." Milo wandered deep into the labyrinth of shelves, the smell of old paper filling the air. He reached a corner where the light was dim and the ceiling was high. Suddenly, he heard it, a sound like dry leaves skittering across a floor. He leaned closer to a shelf packed with giant, heavy encyclopedias. Tucked away in a dark gap was a small, dusty blue book. It wasn't just sitting there. It was trembling, ever so slightly. Milo pulled the book from the shelf and blew off a cloud of clay dust. As he opened the cover, tiny voices rose from the pages. "Please," a voice squeaked. "We are stuck. The stories are tangled, and we can't find our way out." Milo stared in wonder. The ink on the pages seemed to move, and he felt a strange, tingly pull at his fingertips. He realized the book wasn't just telling a story, it was asking him to be part of one. With a sudden whoosh, the library vanished. Milo found himself standing in a lush green forest next to a knight in silver armor named Sir Cedric. Sir Cedric looked very frustrated, pointing at a rushing river. "The bridge is gone," he cried. Milo looked closely at a thick curtain of tangled vines hanging from a great oak tree. He pulled the vines aside, revealing a sturdy stone bridge that had been hidden from view. Sir Cedric let out a cheer. The scene shifted instantly to a sandy beach. A pirate with a magnificent beard, Captain Barnaby, was digging holes in the sand and grumbling. "I've lost the way to the treasure," he shouted. Milo noticed an old wooden treasure chest sitting nearby. He tipped it over and saw a series of faint lines etched into the back of the wood. "Look, Captain," Milo said. "The map isn't inside the chest. It's drawn on the back." Next, Milo found himself in a valley of giant flowers. Sitting on a boulder was Bram, a giant as tall as a house, looking very sad. "I've forgotten how to laugh," Bram sighed, his voice like rolling thunder. Milo began to hop and dance, making the silliest faces he could manage. He tumbled over a soft, mossy mound and landed with a silly splat. Bram began to chuckle, then roar with a laughter so big it made the whole valley shake. High on a mountain peak, Milo met a tiny dragon named Flare. Flare was shivering, her scales a bright orange. "I'm too scared to fly," she whispered. Milo knelt down and patted her head. "Just take one tiny step," he encouraged. "I'll be right here." He walked beside her to the edge of a small ledge. With a deep breath and a little nudge from Milo, Flare spread her wings and caught a gentle breeze. Suddenly, the ground beneath Milo's red sneakers began to tremble violently. The sky turned a swirling purple, and the forest, the beach, and the mountains began to bleed into one another. Sir Cedric the Knight appeared, but he wasn't walking. He was wobbling atop a confused, long-necked dinosaur. "Everything is mixing up," Milo cried out. The stories were breaking because they weren't being finished properly. The chaos grew wilder. Captain Barnaby the pirate was wandering through a thick forest, looking for his ship, while Flare the dragon flew past him carrying a bundle of letters in her claws like a mailman. "Nothing makes sense anymore," Milo shouted over the sound of the rushing wind. He knew he had to find a way to put the characters back where they belonged before the library stories were lost forever. Milo ran toward the highest point he could see, a shimmering tower made of stacked books. At the very top, he found the great story clock. Its gears were made of gold and silver, but they weren't moving. A giant gap sat at the center of the clock's face. "The final gear is missing," Milo realized, touching the cold metal. Without the clock ticking, the stories would stay scrambled in a giant, messy pile. Milo looked around for a gear, but there was nothing but blank paper scattered on the floor. Then he remembered Miss Maple's words. The library was a place of magic, and he was the one inside the story. He realized the missing gear wasn't a piece of metal at all. It was an ending. The blue book had brought him here because it was waiting for someone to finish the tale. Milo picked up a quill pen that was resting on a nearby pedestal. He smoothed out a blank page and thought about Sir Cedric, Captain Barnaby, Bram, and Flare. With a steady hand, he wrote the words in big, bold letters, and everyone found their way home. As soon as the last period was dotted, the paper transformed into a glowing golden gear and slotted itself perfectly into the great story clock. Tick, tock, tick. A magical wind swept through the tower. Milo watched as the knight, the pirate, the giant, and the dragon were gently lifted by the breeze. They waved to him as they were pulled back into their own pages. Sir Cedric returned to his bridge, Captain Barnaby to his treasure, Bram to his laughter, and Flare to the sky. The worlds separated, returning to the beautiful order of the library shelves. Milo blinked, and suddenly he was back in the quiet library. The rain had stopped, and a soft sunlight was peeking through the windows. He was holding the blue book, which was now perfectly still. Miss Maple looked up from her desk and smiled. "You look like you've traveled a long way, Milo," she said. Milo hugged the book to his chest. He realized books weren't boring. They were doorways to worlds waiting to be saved. What we learned today: books can take us places our feet cannot. Listening helps us discover wonders. Helping others find courage is important. Curiosity opens doors.